Swoosh! Lin Feng stepped into the divine abode. Unlike the pitch-black surroundings he had imagined, there was a huge continent in the divine abode. This continent was too huge. Even with Lin Feng's Kiliacosm sovereign-level mental power, he could not explore it completely. It was at least equivalent to dozens of small Kiliacosms. Of course, the continent might also contain many worlds, but there were no rules here. That's right, it was a state of disorder. It was between a space and a world, and was very miraculous. Perhaps only the medium Kiliacosm sovereign could establish such a place. Even those high-level Kiliacosm sovereigns could not establish such a place. There are 3 types of things in the divine abode: supreme treasures, secret techniques, and small Kiliacosm origin. Lin Feng recalled some information about the divine abode in his mind. Without a doubt, Lin Feng's first goal was definitely the small Kiliacosm origin. For the rest, be it supreme treasures or secret techniques, it would naturally be very good if he could obtain them. Even if he could not use them, he could give them to Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic or Supremacies of the Chaos Dojo as rewards to increase the foundation of the dojo. There are rules for competing for treasures set by Kiliacosm Sovereign Mythical Tree in the Divine Palace, and the rules are different every time. What are the rules this time? Lin Feng looked around. His surroundings were empty. Clearly, there was no one around. They were all in different places. After all, the divine abode was just too huge. It was very difficult to even encounter them. In the first round, kill void behemoths and obtain the wisdom pearls. Every wisdom pearl contains information about a supreme treasure or a secret technique. After use, the wisdom pearl will disappear. 100 wisdom can show the rules of the second round. A voice suddenly entered Lin Feng's ears. However, when he took a closer look, he did not discover where the sound came from. Or rather, it came from all directions, from the entire divine abode. Is this the rule of the divine abode? In other words, we have to find the void behemoths first. Lin Feng knew about the void behemoth. It was a special life form that survived in the void. Even a 3-star supremacy could not survive in the void, but this kind of void behemoth could. It was very miraculous. Moreover, every void behemoth was very powerful. They were all at least comparable to top-notch 3-star supremacies. Moreover, in an environment like the void, they were even enhanced. If it was moved to the medium Kiliacosm, even a few top-notch 3-star supremacies might not be its match. These void behemoths were extremely troublesome to deal with. However, the Kiliacosm sovereigns were great and powerful, and were already standing at the peak of life. Hence, void behemoths were nothing to the Kiliacosm sovereigns. Hence, Lin Feng guessed that this first round should be a test left behind by Kiliacosm Sovereign Mythical Tree for those supremacies. Those supremacies also entered the divine abode to obtain opportunities, but how could they compete with the Kiliacosm sovereigns? In this first round, killing the void behemoths was undoubtedly an opportunity for those supremacies. No matter what method they used, as long as they could kill the void behemoth and obtain the wisdom pearl, they would be able to obtain a secret technique or a powerful supreme treasure. To 3-star supremacies, this was already a huge gain. Lin Feng also roughly understood the arrangements of Kiliacosm Sovereign Mythical Tree. The first round was not difficult for Kiliacosm sovereigns. It only required collecting 100 wisdom pearls without using them. The true use of the first level was actually obtaining a chance of entering the second level. Only the second level was what the Kiliacosm sovereigns truly valued. Let's begin the search. Lin Feng began to mobilize his Kiliacosm sovereign-level mental power, which was enough to cover the range of a small Kiliacosm. It was all too easy to find the void behemoth. Even though the space in the divine abode was huge, at most, the Kiliacosm sovereigns would use their fastest speed to scan area by area, and all the void behemoths would be exposed. Found it! Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. Then he summoned the river of space-time, stepped into it, and began to warp through the void. Originally, in the divine palace, even a Kiliacosm sovereign could not warp through the void. They could only fly at their own speed. This way, the speed at which they killed the void behemoths would definitely become very slow. However, Lin Feng's river of spacetime was not restricted at all. Lin Feng could warp space directly. Heavens, there are a total of 3 void behemoths. This is really unlucky. 3 void behemoths. We're finished. We thought that it was a huge opportunity. Who would have thought that it's simply a huge trap? Why are there 3 void behemoths? In a space, there were 5 3-star supremacies. They were all free 3-star supremacies and had not joined any dojos. They took the risk to enter the mythical tree divine abode this time also to try their luck, hoping to obtain some supreme treasures or secret techniques, so that they could become invincible 3-star supremacies. However, who would have thought that they would encounter 3 void behemoths at once? If there was only one, it would be a huge surprise for them. The 5 top-notch 3-star supremacies could try to surround and kill a void behemoth. Even if there were 2 of them, the 5 of them might be able to succeed with some struggles. But 3 void behemoths? To the 5 of them, that was despair. Moreover, the speed of the void behemoths was extremely fast, and they were very difficult to kill. They could not escape even if they wanted to. In just a short period of time, the 5 of them were already covered in injuries, and 3 of them were severely injured. If this continued, the 5 of them would all be devoured by the void behemoth in less than an hour. But just as the 5 of them were despairing, a surging river appeared in the void, flickering with faint specks of light. Boom! Right on the heels of that, a terrifying world power suddenly erupted from the river of space-time, and a majestic figure appeared in the void. That is a Kiliacosm Sovereign. The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. It's the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign's river of space-time. It's actually the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. The 5 of them were excited, but their expressions were very complicated. They did not know if they should be glad or sad to encounter a Kiliacosm Sovereign. With the Kiliacosm Sovereign around, they definitely would not be able to obtain the wisdom pearl of the void behemoth. However, the Kiliacosm Sovereign who appeared could also help them to kill the void behemoth, thus saving their lives. Hence, they felt disappointment and regret. Lin Feng waved his hand, and world power swept over like rolling waves. With a terrifying force, it landed on the 2 void behemoths. Immediately, the 2 void behemoths were crushed without even wailing. 2 bright wisdom pearls landed in Lin Feng's hand. Lin Feng glanced at the 5 3-star supremacies. 2 of them were very strong. They could even escape from the void behemoth. However, they did not choose to escape. Instead, they stayed behind and resisted the void behemoth with the 3 severely injured supremacies. Such supremacies were simply too rare in the medium Kiliacosm. Lin Feng also felt a trace of compassion. He said calmly, "You're very good. I'll leave that void behemoth to you. Whether you can seize the opportunity will depend on yourselves." With that, he entered the river of spacetime and instantly disappeared. The 5 supremacies were still a little stunned. They looked at the void behemoth in disbelief. The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. This is an opportunity left to us by the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. Let's attack. What are we waiting for? The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign left us a void behemoth. This is the greatest opportunity. We must seize this opportunity. Kill! Battle intent erupted in the 5 3-star supremacies erupted again. They charged towards the void behemoth. At this moment, Lin Feng was already in an empty space. 2 pearls appeared in his hand. They were the wisdom pearls. So these are wisdom pearls? Let me try them first and see what exactly Kiliacosm Sovereign mythical tree left behind. Lin Feng then extended his mental power into the 2 wisdom pearls. Buzz. Lin Feng's mental power extended into the 2 wisdom pearls. Immediately, 2 new messages were transmitted to his mind. These 2 messages were about 2 specific coordinates. From these coordinates, one could obtain a supreme treasure or secret technique. When Lin Feng woke up, the 2 wisdom pearls had already disappeared. 2 exact locations of the divine abode appeared in Lin Feng's mind. He might obtain supreme treasures or secret techniques. However, at the same time, the wisdom pearls had disappeared. Naturally, if Lin Feng wanted to gather 100 wisdom pearls and enter the next level, he would have to work harder. For every gain, there would be a loss. This was the significance of the first round. If one only wanted to obtain some supreme treasures or secret techniques, they could naturally use the wisdom pearls to search for supreme treasures or secret techniques. However, if they wanted to enter the second round, they could not use the wisdom pearls. Instead, they should search and accumulate more wisdom pearls. Only by accumulating 100 wisdom pearls could they enter the next round of the test. Swoosh! Lin Feng flew straight towards the specific coordinates of a certain location. Not long after, he arrived at a certain location. This is the place. Lin Feng saw a small mountain below. He grabbed with his hand, and the small mountain instantly shattered into dust, revealing a supreme treasure emitting a white light. This was a transparent pearl the size of a fist. Lin Feng grabbed it and realized that it was actually a defensive supreme treasure. With a thought, the pearl transformed into a beam of light and stuck to his body. It was very discreet and undetectable. Lin Feng gave it a try. It was also rather good. Even a top-notch 3-star supremacy could only shake it. As for breaking it, it was very, very difficult. Only after a long battle or a siege by many people could one perhaps break the defense of this supreme treasure. Lin Feng was rather satisfied with this supreme treasure. It was naturally impossible for him to use it himself. After all, the secret techniques or supreme treasures in the first level were actually prepared for those supremacies, and were naturally useless to the Kiliacosm sovereigns. However, Lin Feng could also reward these to the supremacies of the Chaos Dojo, especially those supremacies who had made contributions. After obtaining this supreme treasure, they would undoubtedly obtain their best guarantee of safety when they descended into the small Kiliacosm. To those 3-star supremacies, this was a rare supreme treasure. Next, Lin Feng went to the second location. This time, he obtained a secret technique that was only used by ordinary supremacies. It could enhance some of the offensive methods of the supremacies. It was actually also certain techniques to use the power of the internal Kiliacosm domain. Even Lin Feng could figure out these techniques as long as he took some time. However, Lin Feng had never thought of figuring out these techniques. After all, these techniques were useless to Lin Feng and were not beneficial to cultivation. They only improved the combat power of the supremacies to a certain extent. However, Kiliacosm's sovereign mythical tree's lifespan was infinite, and without the threat of epical cataclysms, he was carefree. Naturally, he could spend time researching these methods to increase the strength of supremacies. Then, Lin Feng continued to sweep the void behemoths region by region. He had the river of spacetime and could warp almost at any time. Hence, he was inherently faster and more efficient than any Kiliacosm sovereign. He did not even deliberately gather 100 wisdom pearls. Instead, he continued to sweep through the void behemoths to obtain the secret techniques and supreme treasures in the wisdom pearls. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Be it supreme treasures or secret techniques, although they could not increase Lin Feng's strength, they could increase the foundation of the Chaos Dojo. Collecting the wisdom pearls was a piece of cake for Lin Feng. Why wouldn't he be happy to obtain so many secret techniques and supreme treasures? Hence, as Lin Feng continued to sweep, the number of void behemoths decreased. Lin Feng did not continue to use the wisdom pearls, but began to accumulate them. In just a few days, Lin Feng swept through a large number of void behemoths again and obtained hundreds of wisdom pearls. Lin Feng swept through a large area and felt that it was about time. In the divine abode, one had to know when to stop. After all, the various secret techniques and supreme treasures left behind in the divine abode set up by Kiliacosm's sovereign mythical tree were not prepared for Lin Feng alone. If he really swept through the entire divine abode, he might displease Kiliacosm's sovereign mythical tree. Displeasing a medium Kiliacosm sovereign would mean huge trouble. Hence, Lin Feng restrained himself. After obtaining the 100 wisdom pearls, he decisively stopped sweeping through the void beasts and put the 100 wisdom pearls together. Buzz! The 100 wisdom pearls gradually fused into one. At the same time, a strange power surged out of the 100 wisdom pearls and enveloped Lin Feng. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Lin Feng disappeared. Boom! An earth-shattering sound echoed in a hall. Retreat! Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon and Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam both retreated from the tunnel in a sorry state. We failed again. This is already the third time. Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling expression was a little dark. He had joined forces with Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam for a total of 3 times, but they had actually failed each time. It had to be known that they were peak 2 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereigns. However, there was really nothing they could do about this test in the second round. Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam's expression was dark as he said in a low voice, "We still have a chance. The other Kiliakosm Sovereigns have yet to gather 100 wisdom pearls. In other words, they have yet to reach the second round for the time being. As long as we think of a way, there will always be a chance." Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam looked around. There was indeed no one else. He and Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon collected the wisdom pearls very quickly. Hence, the two of them quickly collected 200 wisdom pearls and were the first to arrive at the second round. They had originally thought that they could seize the initiative first, but they did not expect the second test to be so difficult. Up until now, they had yet to pass the second test. Swoosh! At this moment, an invisible force gradually filled the hall. Right on the heels of that, a figure appeared in the hall. "You've also gathered 100 wisdom pearls?" Seeing this figure, Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon's gaze suddenly sharpened, as if he was a little surprised. His expression gradually darkened. Lin Feng raised his brows. He had also seen Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon and Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam. He did not expect the two of them to be so fast. They had actually both arrived at the second round. It had to be known that, by relying on the river of spacetime, Lin Feng's speed of collecting the wisdom pearls was countless times faster than other Kiliakosm sovereigns. Even if he intentionally collected some secret techniques and supreme treasures, his speed would not be much slower. Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon must be very well prepared to arrive at the second round before him. Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon, Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam, you came to the second round so quickly. I wonder what the content of the second round is. None of you seem to have passed the second round. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes and asked with a half-smile. Humph. Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. Won't you know the content of the second round after giving it a try? Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon's expression was a little dark. Lin Feng had pointed out his weakness. He and Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam had joined forces 3 times, but they still could not pass. It was already embarrassing enough. They originally thought that they had some advantages, and that they were the only ones who had entered the second round. Unexpectedly, the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign Lin Feng had also arrived at the second round. That would be a little troublesome. However, they did not believe that Lin Feng could pass the second round either. Lin Feng ignored Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon. Actually, when he came to this hall, he had already obtained the content of the second round in his mind. The content of the second round was very simple. One could enter the third round by defeating an ancestral devil that was a realm stronger than themselves. For example, for ordinary supremacies, be they 1-star, 2-star, or 3-star supremacies, as long as they entered the second level, they would face an ancestral devil comparable to a 1 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. If he was a 1 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign, he would be facing an ancestral devil comparable to a 2 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. Thus, a 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign would face an ancestral devil comparable to a 4 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. If they joined forces, the strength of the ancestral devil they faced would correspondingly increase substantially. Although they just needed to defeat their opponent, not kill, it was actually still very difficult. Before this, Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon and Kiliakosm Sovereign Bedlam both tried to face an ancestral devil alone, but they failed. Later, the two of them joined forces and faced an ancestral devil. However, that ancestral devil was clearly much stronger and still failed. Swoosh! At this moment, another Kiliakosm Sovereign arrived. As soon as this Kiliakosm Sovereign arrived, everyone's gazes converged on him. The reason was very simple. It was because this was a 3 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. Kiliakosm Sovereign Primeval Space, you're here too. Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon's expression was solemn. The other party was a famed three-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. No amount of serious regard for him was too high. A sharp glint flashed across Kiliakosm sovereign Primeval Space's eyes. Then, he smiled and said, "I'm a little surprised that you're actually here too. You can't even pass this second round." Kiliakosm sovereign Primeval Space naturally knew the rules of the second round. When he saw that the Kiliakosm sovereign Prowling Dragon, the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, and Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam were all at the second round, and their expressions were still very dark, he already guessed the outcome. Lin Feng was not in a hurry to challenge the round. If he could pass it, he could. If he could not, it was useless no matter how anxious he was. Moreover, there was still the third round after the second round. Swoosh! 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 Soon, other Kiliakosm sovereigns arrived in the hall one after another. There were 1 cataclysm, 2 cataclysm, and even 3 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Those 1 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns were all pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns. Most of them were pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns under the command of those Kiliakosm sovereigns above 4 cataclysm. They were just here to try their luck. After discovering the rules of the second round, they all shook their heads. These pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns were already weaker than true Kiliakosm sovereigns. They stood even less of a chance to challenge opponents above their level. Hence, the second round basically announced that the pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns were eliminated. "I'll give it a try." So many Kiliakosm sovereigns had gathered, but none of them stepped forward to challenge the second round. In the end, a pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign under a 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign stood up to challenge the second round. Everyone waited quietly for the outcome. The time was very short. Almost as soon as he entered, he retreated. Moreover, he was severely injured and looked disheveled. "I almost fell." That was a true ancestral devil comparable to a 2-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. This pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign did not conceal it anymore and told him the details inside. That was an actual ancestral devil, and ancestral devils that harbored great hatred for the Kiliakosm sovereigns. These ancestral devils were usually trapped in the forbidden area and could not leave. It was only in the divine abode that Kiliakosm sovereign mythical tree allowed these ancestral devils to attack. How could these ancestral devils hold back? They would naturally fight to their full power, and even try to severely injure or even kill the Kiliakosm sovereign at all costs. There was no room for compromise between the two parties at all. Kiliakosm sovereign Prowling Dragon and Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam had challenged it a few times in a row, but could still retreat unscathed. This was already rather impressive. In fact, those who were slightly inferior might even fall. For a moment, all the Kiliakosm sovereigns fell silent. "I'll give it a try." After a long while, Kiliakosm sovereign Primeval Space stood up. He was prepared to give it a try. As a 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, there was actually no advantage for him in challenging the second round, because he was facing an ancestral devil comparable to a 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. The difference between 3-cataclysm to 4-cataclysm was actually even greater. Kiliakosm sovereign Primeval Space's chances of winning were very slim. Everyone waited quietly. 15 minutes, half an hour. Everyone was a little surprised. Why hadn't the Kiliakosm sovereign Primeval Space returned after an hour? Could he have cleared it? For hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. A day had passed, but there was still no movement. At this moment, a Kiliakosm sovereign said softly, "Could he have fallen?" Fallen. Everyone was shocked. They had never thought of this possibility before. After all, Kiliakosm sovereign Primeval Space was a dignified 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Even though the appearance of the divine abode had shaken the medium Kiliakosm this time, and some 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns had come, there were very few of them. Kiliakosm sovereign Primeval Space was one of them. It was normal for him to be no match for a 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, but a 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign had many abilities. It should not be a problem for him to stay alive. How could he have fallen? Boom! The door to the second round suddenly closed. Everyone looked at each other. Kiliakosm sovereign Prowling Dragon and Kiliakosm sovereign Bedlam knew very well what this meant. The door was closed, which meant that the battle inside had ended. However, the passage to the third round in the divine abode had not been opened. He's fallen. Kiliakosm's sovereign primeval space has fallen. Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon muttered softly. This news was like a bolt from the blue, shocking all the Kiliakosm sovereigns. The appearance of the divine abode represented opportunities. Many Kiliakosm sovereigns also entered the divine abode to search for opportunities. Although they had heard that Kiliakosm sovereigns would fall in the divine abode in the past, it had been too long. No one thought that they would fall. Moreover, how could killing the void behemoths in the first round pose any danger to the Kiliakosm sovereigns? But now, the Kiliakosm sovereign primeval space had fallen. This was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue, waking all the Kiliakosm sovereigns up. This was the divine abode, a very dangerous place. Every time, Kiliakosm sovereigns would fall. This time, a 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign had fallen. Even in the past, when the divine abode appeared, it was very rare. There were not many 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns in the medium Kiliakosm. As long as they took another step forward, they could become a 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. In the medium Kiliakosm, they were undoubtedly hegemons. This could not help but make everyone's heart skip a beat. Even Kiliakosm's sovereign primeval space had fallen. They stood even less of a chance. At this moment, the Kiliakosm sovereigns who originally wanted to give it a try lost their conviction and hesitated. They did not dare to take the risk anymore, afraid that they would end up like Kiliakosm's sovereign primeval space. Even Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon and Kiliakosm's sovereign bedlam felt a sense of fear. From the looks of it, they were already lucky enough to retreat unscathed the previous few times. I'll give it a try. Just as all the Kiliakosm sovereigns were hesitating about whether to give it a try, Lin Feng stood up. His expression was calm, as if he was very composed. He walked straight towards the passage for the second round. At this moment, all the Kiliakosm sovereigns glanced over, and a strange look flashed across their eyes. The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. It's actually the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. It's the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign again. He's gonna challenge the second round? Even Kiliakosm's sovereign primeval space is dead. Is he confident that he can pass? The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign is a 2-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. The ancestral devil he's facing isn't that terrifying. It's just an ancestral devil comparable to a 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. However, even so, it's still very difficult to defeat the ancestral devil. The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign has always been mysterious. Moreover, if he could kill a 2-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign like Kiliakosm Sovereign Black Hero, it's not impossible for him to defeat a 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. Let's just wait. If he succeeds, perhaps we can give it a try too. The entire hall gradually became noisy. All the Kiliakosm Sovereign's gazes landed on Lin Feng, and Lin Feng became the focus of the entire place. Someone who could still decide to challenge the second round at a time like this was really very courageous. Lin Feng did not pay attention to everyone's gazes. Whether he went to challenge the second round did not depend on whether Kiliakosm's sovereign primeval space succeeded. He had only one goal in coming to the divine abode. It was the small Kiliakosm origin, and a large amount of small Kiliakosm origin at that. As for danger, facing a 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign, even if he was a peak 3-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign, would Lin Feng, who had the principle of spacetime, be in danger? Lin Feng did not think that he would be in danger. If the principle of spacetime was so easily restricted, it would not be the principle of spacetime. Even medium Kiliakosm sovereigns could not restrict the principle of spacetime. Hence, Lin Feng could also use the principle of spacetime in the divine abode. But Lin Feng felt that his body was enveloped by a force. The moment he stepped into the passage, he had already entered an unfamiliar space. This space was very, very large, with no end in sight. Moreover, there were no special forms of suppression, and he could use his abilities to his heart's content. Kiliakosm Sovereign. Another Kiliakosm Sovereign has come courting death again. A cold voice sounded in the space. Lin Feng looked up. It was an ancestral devil whose entire body emitted black flames. The aura it emitted was far stronger than ancestral devil blood spirit that Lin Feng had killed back then. It even far exceeded a 2-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign, almost reaching an extreme. This was an ancestral devil comparable to a 3-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign. Facing such a powerful ancestral devil, even Lin Feng felt pressure. This meant that this ancestral devil had the strength to threaten him, and could even severely injure him. Of course, the prerequisite was that Lin Feng did not use the river of spacetime. Kill! Without saying anything else, the ancestral devil attacked. The ancestral devil's body expanded rapidly, becoming infinitely huge. Black flames filled his entire body, apparently forming a huge black phantom. The heavy pressure pressed down hard on Lin Feng. Even with Lin Feng's aura as a 2-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign, he was suppressed to the limit. Lin Feng had no choice but to mobilize the small kiliacosm power and unleash it with a bang. Euro Lotus. With a thought from Lin Feng, the small kiliacosm power quickly formed a lotus that spun continuously like a top. A large amount of small kiliacosm power gathered in the lotus, blocking all the black flames of the ancestral devil outside the small kiliacosm. This was Kiliacosm Sovereign Black Gyro's Euro Lotus. After Lin Feng killed him with the river of spacetime, Lin Feng obtained the condensed Euro Lotus, the core power of Kiliacosm Sovereign Black Euro. Indeed, this Euro Lotus did not disappoint Lin Feng, as expected of a supreme treasure that most excelled at defense. Even though Lin Feng had just condensed it and had not nurtured it for long, it already displayed astonishing defensive power. For a time, even the ancestral devil could not break Lin Feng's defense. Boom! The ancestral devil extended a huge palm and struck Lin Feng's small kiliacosm hard. Immediately, the Euro Lotus spun wildly, flickering as it withstood the immense pressure. However, this pressure was simply too great. Even the Euro Lotus only held out for a moment before shattering. Crack! The Euro Lotus shattered, but the moment it shattered, it also exhausted the power of the ancestral devil's strike. The remaining power struck Lin Feng's small kiliacosm hard, but it could not shake the small kiliacosm anymore. Lin Feng's expression was very solemn. With his normal strength, he could only withstand a single strike. Moreover, there was the Euro Lotus. This Euro Lotus was a supreme defensive treasure. Even though he had just condensed it, its power was still extraordinary. Yet he could still only withstand a single strike. 3-cataclysm was 3-cataclysm after all. Even an ancestral devil that was only comparable to a 3-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign was far from what a 2-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign could compare to. Being able to withstand a strike from the ancestral devil head-on was already very impressive. If it were any other kiliacosm sovereign, they could even quickly leave the battle and return to the hall again, and even return unscathed. This was the case for Kiliacosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon and Kiliacosm Sovereign Bedlam. Basically, they could only withstand a single strike, suffer minor injuries, and retreat quickly without engaging in a prolonged fight. However, Lin Feng did not just want to retreat unscathed. After all, no matter how unscathed he was, it was still a failure. If he did not pass the second round, he would not be able to enter the third round and obtain the small kiliacosm origin of the divine abode. This was not Lin Feng's goal. Lin Feng's strongest ability had never been the Euro Lotus, nor the small kiliacosm power, but the principle of spacetime. This was also the strongest ability Lin Feng had at the moment. However, once he used the river of spacetime and swept the ancestral devil into it, the burden Lin Feng would have to endure would be unimaginable. If Lin Feng was determined to kill the ancestral devil, he would have to pay a heavy price. In fact, he could not hold out at all. However, Lin Feng did not hesitate at all at this moment. Boom! In the void, a majestic and huge river appeared. It surged continuously, as if it contained infinite mystery. This was the river of spacetime, the truly transcendent rules of the myriad worlds. It was the principle of spacetime that even medium kiliacosm sovereigns had not mastered. As soon as the river of spacetime appeared, it immediately swept down majestically, dragging the ancestral devil into the river of spacetime. Lin Feng's entire body shook. He felt pressure, a heavy pressure. The pressure was unimaginable. It was as if his small kiliocosm was pressed down by a huge mountain. The huge mountain felt like it could crush his small kiliocosm at any moment. If Lin Feng had not survived the second epical cataclysm and become a two-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign, increasing his internal small kiliocosm by dozens or hundreds of times, he would not be able to withstand such a huge burden at all now. He could not even withstand it for an instant. Hold out. Lin Feng still held out with all his might. The small kiliocosm of a two-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign was sufficiently stable. Even if a three-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign was swept into the river of spacetime, he could still hold out for a period of time. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. After only 3 breaths, Lin Feng sensed that the life force of the ancestral devil was beginning to weaken. He was overjoyed. At this moment, traces of ripples actually appeared in this space. Right on the heels of that, they suddenly enveloped Lin Feng and disappeared instantly. It left only the ancestral devil, who had fallen out of the river of spacetime, panting violently and looking terrified. Boom! As the divine abode shook, many kiliocosm sovereigns saw that the passage to the third round had actually opened. The passage to the second round closed with it. All the kiliocosm sovereigns were dumbfounded. They looked at each other in disbelief. What? How long has it been? 3 breaths? 5 breaths? The Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign has already defeated an ancestral devil comparable to a 3-cataclysm Kiliocosm Sovereign and passed the test. How is this possible? That's an ancestral devil comparable to a 3-cataclysm Kiliocosm Sovereign. It's not like we haven't tried it before. He's just too strong. We'd be lucky to retreat unscathed, let alone defeat him. How did the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign do it? Could it be the principle of spacetime? It's said that the principle of spacetime is very mysterious and powerful, but no one knows how powerful it is until they've truly experienced it for themselves. Be it the ancestral devils or the Kiliocosm sovereigns, anyone who experienced the principle of spacetime for themselves had died. The Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign has already reached the third round. No, I have to take a risk no matter what. I can't let the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign take so much small Kiliocosm origin alone. Many Kiliocosm sovereigns were stimulated by Lin Feng. Since Lin Feng could pass, why couldn't they? Hence, many Kiliocosm sovereigns entered the second round one after another. Even though they had already learned the lesson from many failures before, and even saw the lesson of the death of a 3-cataclysm Kiliocosm sovereign, it still could not stop the passion of many Kiliocosm sovereigns. However, not a single one of them actually passed. Swoosh! Lin Feng felt the world spin. An unstoppable force moved him directly into another passage, and the river of spacetime disappeared. He didn't fall? Lin Feng sensed carefully. There was no sign or aura of that ancestral devil in his river of spacetime, nor was there the core power left behind by that ancestral devil. This meant that the ancestral devil was not dead. The condition for passing the second level was to defeat the ancestral devil, not kill him. Hence, after Lin Feng's river of spacetime swept the ancestral devil into the river of spacetime for a period of time, it was determined that the ancestral devil had been defeated. Then, Lin Feng was moved out of that space. Without control, the river of spacetime naturally disappeared. Actually, Lin Feng was also very lucky. If this continued, he did not know how long he could hold out for. With his current small kiliocosm, it was really a little difficult for him to completely withstand the burden and kill a 3-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. He'd have to risk his life trying to know whether he could succeed or not. However, even if he really succeeded, Lin Feng would definitely suffer heavy losses. His small kiliocosm might even collapse and be severely damaged. The outcome this time was already good. If the burden was any greater, Lin Feng's small kiliocosm would collapse completely. As for now, Lin Feng's small kiliocosm only had some cracks. In reality, the damage was slight. In the blink of an eye, it had already recovered. I'm in the third round. Lin Feng looked around. He was in a spacious passage. According to the hint, this was the passage to the third round. As long as one passed the third round, they would be able to obtain a large amount of small kiliocosm origin in the divine abode. However, the third round was also the most difficult. As for what the third round was, Lin Feng did not know either, nor did anyone. Even those who had entered the divine abode before did not know. After all, every time the divine abode appeared, the rules and tests inside would change. Only Kiliakosm's sovereign mythical tree knew the content of the test in the third round. Let me recover first. Lin Feng was not in a hurry to enter the third round. Instead, he sat cross-legged in the passage and slowly recovered. When he adjusted his condition to its peak, he opened his eyes and walked towards the third round. Rumble. The stone gate of the third round slowly opened. Lin Feng looked around and saw 9 secret chambers. Soon, Lin Feng also received a hint in his mind. There was a unique secret technique stored in the 9 secret chambers. As long as one mastered this secret technique completely within a year of the appearance of the divine abode, they would be able to obtain the small Kiliakosm origin in the divine abode. The rule this time was that the winner would take all, but it also gave everyone a fair opportunity. Even for those Kiliakosm sovereigns who entered the third round later, as long as their comprehension ability was outstanding, it was not impossible for them to catch up to the previous Kiliakosm sovereigns who passed and obtain the small Kiliakosm origin. After understanding this rule, however, Lin Feng's expression became very strange. Comprehending a secret technique in a year? To other Kiliakosm sovereigns, it was probably very fair. However, to Lin Feng, who possessed the principle of spacetime, he simply had a cheat. This was because he could accelerate time. Given 1 year, he could even use time acceleration to comprehend the secret technique for billions of years in actuality. How could he not be able to master a secret technique after that? Could it be that the small Kiliakosm origin in the divine abode was specially left to me by Kiliakosm's sovereign mythical tree? Lin Feng muttered softly. This was simply a test tailor-made for him. He could complete it easily without any effort. If not for the fact that he had never seen Kiliakosm's sovereign mythical tree before, Lin Feng would even suspect that Kiliakosm's sovereign mythical tree had deliberately prepared it. However, Lin Feng was certain that a dignified medium Kiliakosm sovereign would not be so senseless and shallow. The 3 tests in the divine abode must have been set by Kiliakosm's sovereign mythical tree long ago. At that time, Lin Feng probably had not even become a Kiliakosm sovereign. After Lin Feng learned the exact content of the third round, he no longer hesitated. He randomly chose a secret chamber and walked in directly. 3 figures floated in a miraculous void. Swoosh! Suddenly, all 3 figures opened their eyes. Among them, a smile appeared on the black-robed man's lips. He said with a smile, Kiliakosm's sovereign mythical tree, the third round in your divine abode is not looking good. That little fellow thought that you specially prepared it for him. Haha, he doesn't even appreciate it. Interesting. The man in the middle was none other than Kiliakosm's sovereign mythical tree. He could not help but smile when he heard this. This little fellow really has boundless prospects. My purpose in establishing the divine abode is to give these junior Kiliakosm sovereigns a trace of hope and help. This chaos Kiliakosm sovereign's growth experience is not simple. He actually possesses the principle of spacetime. Do you think he obtained the legacy left behind by that person? The legacy left behind by that person? That's not necessarily the case. He might have obtained the spacetime imprint. It has to be known that that person left behind many spacetime imprints. Didn't we also obtain the spacetime imprint back then? We even discovered that there are legends of spacetime imprints elsewhere. However, this Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign seized the opportunity and actually comprehended the principle of spacetime. Although he's still very weak, he already has a sufficiently high starting point. That's right. He already has a high enough starting point. Even we only began to slowly come into contact with the principle of spacetime after becoming medium Kiliakosm sovereigns, but I'm afraid even we haven't comprehended as much as he has up until now. Kiliakosm sovereign mythical tree. That little fellow is already using time acceleration to comprehend the secret technique. This is breaking your rules. Now what? Do you want to warn him not to use time acceleration? Break the rules? That's not the case. The tests in the divine abode are the tests I left behind back then. As for the content of the tests, it was confirmed long ago and is not targeted at anyone. Since he has the principle of spacetime, benefiting from it makes this his opportunity. There's no need to restrict it. That's right. This is his opportunity. This little fellow is really lucky. He's only a 2-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign, but he already has such an opportunity to obtain the small kiliocosm origin of your divine abode. He probably has a chance of even surviving the 4th cataclysm. The 3 medium kiliocosm sovereigns chatted with each other, then closed their eyes. Even the matter of the divine abode and the chaos kiliocosm sovereign with the principle of spacetime was only slightly interesting to them. They would not pay much attention to it at all. Ha ha ha! I finally reached the 3rd round. Kiliocosm sovereign Shilling was just a very inconspicuous kiliocosm sovereign, or to be precise, a very low-key 2-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. Ever since Lin Feng passed the 2nd round, countless kiliocosm sovereigns charged forward one after another. However, most of them did not pass and were even severely injured. However, the many kiliocosm sovereigns were already on guard. Once they sensed that something was amiss, they would immediately retreat from the 2nd round. This way, they could protect themselves and no more kiliocosm sovereigns died. However, after a few months, no one else actually passed the 2nd round. This time, someone finally passed the 2nd round and arrived at the 3rd round. Moreover, it was the previously low-key kiliocosm sovereign Shilling. Kiliocosm sovereign Shilling had only challenged it 3 times. He had failed the first 2 times, but the 3rd time, the kiliocosm sovereign somehow passed the 2nd round and arrived at the 3rd round. However, when kiliocosm sovereign Shilling came to the 3rd round and learned of the rules of the 3rd round, his expression changed abruptly. He knew that the chaos kiliocosm sovereign Lin Feng had already been in the 3rd round for a few months, and must have studied the secret technique for a few months as well. He was already far behind and had to hurry. Otherwise, he would really get nothing. Hence, kiliocosm sovereign Shilling quickly chose a secret chamber and entered to study. At this moment, in the secret chamber, Lin Feng's expression was a little solemn. I've sped up time for 1,000,000 years. Yet I'm still a little short? Just how difficult is this secret technique? Or is this secret technique not compatible with me? Which is why it's so difficult to cultivate. Lin Feng's expression was a little strange. After he arrived at the secret chamber, he picked up this soul refinement technique and studied it. This soul refinement technique was very strange. It was a cultivation method that was effective for even kiliocosm sovereigns, and specially targeted the soul. To the kiliocosm sovereigns, the soul was actually nurtured naturally. After all, the foundation of the kiliocosm sovereigns was the small kiliocosm. As for the soul, they did not pay much attention to it. However, there were actually benefits to having a powerful soul. For example, one could comprehend some rules more thoroughly if their soul power was strong. Also, when they descended into small kiliocosms with the soul, it could also allow them to descend with a stronger soul. Of course, there might be more benefits, but Lin Feng did not know. He only knew these few benefits. Lin Feng had a vague feeling that since Kiliocosm Sovereign Mythical Tree had placed this secret technique here as a test, he naturally would not leave an ordinary secret technique here. There must be a reason. From the way Kiliocosm Sovereign Mythical Tree set up the divine abode, it was probably to nurture Kiliocosm sovereigns. Hence, Lin Feng also cultivated this soul refinement technique very diligently. However, despite his aptitude as an esteemed Kiliocosm sovereign, it was actually so difficult to comprehend it. The only conclusion that could be drawn was that he was really not compatible with this secret technique. However, since he had already made the choice, Lin Feng could not give up. Moreover, he still had a trump card like time acceleration. No matter how incompatible he was with this secret technique, he had to cultivate it successfully. A few months have passed outside. Just now, I sensed that a Kiliocosm sovereign had already entered the third round. Looks like I can't take my time to study it anymore. I have to accelerate time further. In order to not put too much pressure on his internal small Kiliocosm, Lin Feng had always held back in accelerating time previously. But now he could not hold back anymore. If that Kiliocosm sovereign was the first to successfully cultivate the secret technique, the gains would not make up for the losses. After all, once they found a secret technique that was compatible with them, the speed of comprehension would be astonishing. Even comprehending a secret technique in a few days would not be surprising. Time acceleration. Lin Feng accelerated time again. Immediately, the small kiliocosm in his body endured immense pressure. Every day felt like countless years had passed for Lin Feng. From 1,000,000 years, 3,000,000 years, 5,000,000 years, 8,000,000 years, 10,000,000 years. Under Lin Feng's acceleration of time, he had spent a total of tens of millions of years just comprehending this soul refinement technique. What kind of figure was this? Tens of millions of years just to cultivate a secret technique, even if this secret technique was really not compatible with Lin Feng at all. Still, after such a long time, even by brute force, Lin Feng could comprehend this secret technique. Haha! Success! Finally, Lin Feng opened his eyes. Relying on the cheat that was the principle of spacetime, he had spent tens of millions of years cultivating the soul refinement technique to consummation in just a few months outside. Lin Feng felt that the soul refinement technique in its consummate state was very miraculous. His soul had more than doubled in size. It did not look like much, but that was the soul of a kiliocosm sovereign, the soul of a two-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. Now that it had doubled in capacity. What did this mean? Originally, Lin Feng would be satisfied if the soul refinement technique could strengthen his soul by 10%. Even if there were just some benefits after enhancing his soul, it was worth it. He did not expect it to actually enhance it by one-fold. Moreover, Lin Feng also sensed that even though his soul refinement technique had already reached the consummate state, this did not mean that he could no longer temper his soul. On the contrary, the soul refinement technique in its consummate state could circulate automatically, tempering Lin Feng's soul at every moment. In other words, even if Lin Feng did not intentionally temper his soul in the future, the soul refinement technique was actually also circulating automatically. Even though the soul refinement technique at this moment could actually only enhance the soul by a little with accumulation over time, after billions of years or even a few epochs, the enhancement of the soul would also be rather daunting. This was the truly formidable part about the soul refinement technique. Lin Feng used the principle of spacetime and time acceleration to make the impossible possible. This was the special effect of the principle of spacetime. Even if Lin Feng was not compatible with the soul refinement technique at all, so what? If 10,000 years was not enough, were 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years enough? If not, would 10 million years, billions of years, or even a few epochs be enough? The principle of spacetime could turn the mundane into the miraculous. The soul refinement technique is already completely consummate. Then, have I also passed the test of the third round? Lin Feng opened the secret chamber. This secret chamber could only be opened after completely mastering the secret technique. Once it was opened, it also meant that someone had passed the third round and could obtain the small kiliocosm origin in the divine abode. Small kiliocosm origin. Lin Feng opened the secret chamber and saw a huge golden sphere in front of him. This sphere was filled with a massive amount of small kiliocosm origin. Lin Feng had never seen so much small kiliocosm origin. It far surpassed the small kiliocosm origin he had obtained back then. It was even equivalent to dozens or hundreds of portions of small kiliocosm origin. Even entities above the level of four-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns coveted the small kiliocosm origin in the divine abode. But now, this small kiliocosm origin would all become Lin Feng's. No, the small kiliocosm origin is mine. Kiliocosm sovereign Xianxia sensed Lin Feng immediately. He saw Lin Feng leave the secret chamber, which meant that Lin Feng had already passed the test of the third round and could obtain all the small kiliocosm origin. Kiliocosm sovereign Xianxia could not accept it. He did not even study the secret technique anymore. Instead, he unleashed his small kiliocosm power in a frenzy, trying to open the secret chamber and seize the small kiliocosm origin. However, as soon as his power erupted, an even stronger force descended and confined the kiliocosm sovereign instantly. Moreover, he was moved out of the divine abode directly, and his qualifications to enter the divine abode were revoked. Lin Feng did not pay attention to the kiliocosm sovereign Xianxia's actions. He took a deep breath and no longer hesitated. He immediately grabbed with his large hand and caught the huge golden sphere. There seemed to be no resistance at all. It was very easy. However, Lin Feng knew that the prerequisite for all of this was that he had passed the third test. Otherwise, he would only end up like the Kiliakosm Sovereign Shilling, moved out of the divine abode and disqualified from entering it. In the end, the small Kiliakosm origin still fell into Lin Feng's possession. In the passage to the second round of the divine abode, countless Kiliakosm sovereigns were still lingering. All of them wore dark expressions, as if they were thinking about how to pass the second round. At this moment, the passage to the second round suddenly closed. No one could enter anymore. Right on the heels of that, another message appeared in their minds. Someone had passed the third round and obtained the small Kiliakosm origin. Hence, the passage to the second round was completely closed, leaving only the first round. They could still go to kill the void beasts and obtain all kinds of secret techniques and supreme treasures. Moreover, the deadline was only a few months away. In a few months, after the divine abode appeared for a full year, the divine abode would move everyone out and disappear again. This news caused an uproar. Who passed the test in the third round? Previously, there were only 2 people who entered the third round. One of them was the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, who was the first to enter. The other was the rather low-key Kiliakosm Sovereign Shilling. He only entered the third round a few months later. Of these 2 Kiliakosm Sovereigns, the one with the advantage is probably the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. After all, he went in for a few months first. No one knows what the content of the third test is. The probability of the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign obtaining the small Kiliakosm origin is over 80%. This time, the rule is that the winner takes all. The previous few times the divine abode appeared, the rules weren't like this. Everyone could still take their share of the loot. From the looks of it, no one has a chance anymore. What a pity! What a pity! Many Kiliakosm sovereigns' faces were filled with disappointment. Move them to the first round again? But what was the use? Be it secret techniques or supreme treasures, they were actually useless to the Kiliakosm sovereigns. They were just a bunch of people who failed. However, no matter how disappointed and discontent they were, they could not change the outcome. They could only resignedly go to the first round and kill the void behemoth. Those void behemoths were a little unlucky. They were slaughtered in a frenzy by countless Kiliakosm sovereigns. Almost all the void behemoths in the entire divine abode were slaughtered. Lin Feng returned to the secret chamber. This place was actually rather safe. At the very least, he could still stay here for a few months. Without the permission of Kiliakosm Sovereign Mythical Tree, no one could enter the divine abode. Just now, Lin Feng also received news that the passages to the second and third rounds had been closed. In other words, no one could come here anymore. This place is very safe. I can actually give it a try. I can trigger the epical cataclysm in advance, then pass the cataclysm to become a 3 or even 4 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. However, the time is a little too short. Lin Feng was a little hesitant. Although he could accelerate time, if time acceleration was too fast in half a year, even his small Kiliakosm might not be able to withstand it. If the acceleration was too slow, an epoch might not pass in his small Kiliakosm. Forget it. I'll leave first. Although the divine abode was safe, there were hidden dangers. Moreover, Lin Feng could not pass the epical cataclysm however he wanted. Lin Feng used the river of spacetime. The divine abode could not confine the power of the river of spacetime. Hence, to Lin Feng, he could leave the divine abode at any time. Even a supreme treasure forged by Kiliakosm Sovereign could not confine Lin Feng. This was enough to show how extraordinary Lin Feng's principle of spacetime was. Lin Feng quickly entered the river of spacetime. He returned directly to the Chaos Dojo and immediately sent a voice transmission to Kiliakosm Sovereign Epoch. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epoch, I've already left the divine abode. I'll go to the void and pass the third epical cataclysm as soon as possible. I'll leave the matters of the dojo to you. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epoch received Lin Feng's voice transmission and was overjoyed. He did not have much confidence in Lin Feng previously. After all, Many three-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereigns had entered the divine abode. How difficult was it for him to come first and obtain the small kiliacosm origin? However, now that he had received Lin Feng's voice transmission, there was no doubt that Lin Feng had already obtained the small kiliacosm origin. Moreover, he had gained a lot, so much so that he could immediately pass the third epical cataclysm. Once he passed it, he would become a three-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign. Three-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereigns were actually rare among those who entered the divine abode this time. They were already true hegemons below the four-cataclysm giants. In the medium kiliacosm sovereigns above four-cataclysm were true hegemons. None of them would appear lightly. For example, that kiliacosm sovereign nonary star that Lin Feng knew of had never appeared. Just expressing a little interest in Lin Feng's principle of spacetime was enough for kiliacosm sovereign prowling dragon to step forward. This was a hegemon. Even other kiliacosm sovereigns would be afraid of them. The reason was very simple. A hegemon-level entity could kill a kiliacosm sovereign completely. For example, it was actually very difficult for one cataclysm, two cataclysm, or even three cataclysm kiliacosm sovereigns to kill other kiliacosm sovereigns. Even one cataclysm kiliacosm sovereigns had life-preserving methods. Apart from Lin Feng's principle of spacetime, which was too miraculous, no three cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign could guarantee that he could kill other kiliacosm sovereigns. However, a four-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign was different. The small kiliacosm of a four-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign was enough to crush a small kiliacosm of a kiliacosm sovereign below four-cataclysm. In other words, the collision of small kiliacosms could crush them directly. Even the small kiliacosm would be reduced to dust, and the kiliacosm sovereign would naturally fall. This was the terrifying aspect of a four-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign. This was the true reason why four-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereigns were called hegemons. If Lin Feng could become a three-cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign, there was hope for him to get to four-cataclysm. Such a fast speed had never been seen in the entire medium kiliacosm. Even the three famous medium kiliacosm sovereigns had to take things one step at a time and survive the epical cataclysm step by step to eventually become medium kiliacosm sovereigns. Lin Feng seemed to be jumping. He had jumped from one cataclysm to two cataclysm at once, and now he was about to jump to three cataclysm. The speed was simply unbelievable. However, no one would think that Lin Feng's foundation was unstable. At the realm of kiliacosm sovereigns, there was no longer any so-called problem with foundation. Surviving the epical cataclysm meant surviving it. There was definitely no chance of getting lucky at all. After Lin Feng sent the voice transmission to kiliacosm sovereign epic, he entered the river of spacetime directly and arrived at an unfamiliar stretch of void again. He believed that even the medium kiliacosm sovereigns could not deduce his exact location. I finally left. It's not safe in the medium kiliacosm. Lin Feng heaved a long sigh of relief. Actually, there was another important reason why he had left the divine abode. He kept feeling as if he was being spied on. Previously, in the secret chamber while he was accelerating time, he kept feeling as if someone was spying on him. Even though it was very discreet, and he could not even discover who was spying on him, he had a deep understanding of the principle of spacetime. That faint sense could not be wrong. Lin Feng even felt that the master of the divine abode, kiliacosm sovereign mythical tree, might be spying on him. Lin Feng had never seen kiliacosm sovereign mythical tree, nor any of the medium kiliacosm sovereigns. He did not know the likes and dislikes of the medium kiliacosm sovereigns. Hence, since he had obtained the small kiliacosm origin, Lin Feng naturally did not want to put himself in danger. He would not hesitate to leave if he could. It's about enough. I hope so much small kiliacosm origin won't disappoint me. A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. Then, in the void, he began to accelerate time, preparing to face the third epical cataclysm in his internal small kiliacosm. News about the divine abode was already circulating in the medium kiliacosm. A year later, when the divine abode disappeared and everyone was moved out, the truth was revealed. The chaos kiliacosm sovereign, Lin Feng, became the greatest winner, obtaining all the small kiliacosm origin in the divine abode. No one knew how much small kiliocosm origin there was in the divine abode, but according to previous speculations, there was definitely a lot. It could even allow a 3-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign to survive the 4th epical cataclysm, and become a hegemon as a 4-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. Many kiliocosm sovereigns were reevaluating their relationship with the Chaos Dojo and the Chaos Kiliocosm sovereign. Among them, Kiliocosm sovereign Prowling Dragon had the most complicated feelings. He was prepared to join forces with Kiliocosm sovereign Bedlam to enter the divine abode and use all his skills. However, who would have thought that Lin Feng would still obtain the small kiliocosm origin in the end? Moreover, no matter how much small kiliocosm origin there was in the divine abode this time, it was certain that it would definitely allow Lin Feng to survive the 3rd epical cataclysm and become a 3-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. At that time, with Lin Feng's principle of spacetime, he would probably become the strongest person below the hegemons. He would be unparalleled and invincible among 3-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns. Even a 2-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign like him had to avoid the brunt of Lin Feng's force for the time being and keep a low profile. Days passed. The aftershock of the divine abode was still circulating, but one day, it would disappear completely. However, news of the Chaos Kiliocosm sovereign had spread throughout the medium kiliocosm again. It had already made many kiliocosm sovereigns take him seriously. Even many hegemons above the level of 4-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns were paying attention to Lin Feng. Lin Feng naturally did not know about the situation in the medium kiliocosm. At this moment, he was motionless in a mysterious stretch of void, but his body clearly emanated traces of cataclysmic power. The aura of this cataclysmic power could no longer be concealed or even controlled. It gradually emitted, filled with an aura of destruction, annihilation, and decline. Ordinary people who were on the verge of death would basically all emit this aura. However, this aura rarely appeared on kiliocosm sovereigns. Once it appeared, there was only one possibility. The kiliocosm sovereign's epical cataclysm was imminent. Swoosh. Lin Feng suddenly opened his eyes, and a sharp glint flashed across them. An epoch is finally over. Time has been sped up by an epoch. The great cataclysm is imminent. It turned out that Lin Feng had been using the principle of spacetime to accelerate the time in his internal small kiliocosm the whole time. After an epoch had passed, the 3rd epical cataclysm finally arrived. Lin Feng naturally knew that what he was doing was really a little unique. After all, which kiliocosm sovereign would cause the epical cataclysm in advance? None. Almost no kiliocosm sovereign would choose to do this. That would be tantamount to reducing their lifespan. Strictly speaking, the lifespan of a kiliocosm sovereign was infinite. However, they had the epical cataclysms, which often meant that they only had the lifespan of a few epochs. Accelerating time was equivalent to losing a lot of their lifespan. However, to Lin Feng, there was really no difference between living for an epoch or 9 epochs. Moreover, he had already obtained enough small kiliocosm origin. Why wait without doing anything? Since it's already here, erupt. Lin Feng muttered softly. He was already a little eager. This was simply a strange sight. It could not be said that no one would replicate it in the future, but it was definitely unprecedented. Which kiliocosm sovereign would really look forward to the arrival of the epical cataclysm so much? Rumble. As soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, the epical cataclysm erupted completely. It poured down wildly like a surging torrent, instantly sweeping through Lin Feng's entire small kiliocosm. Lin Feng could not be more familiar with the epical cataclysm. He was already a 2-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereign. How could he not be familiar with the epical cataclysm? However, the 3rd epical cataclysm this time was far more ferocious than the previous 2. It was majestic, sweeping through and destroying everything. Even Lin Feng felt his heart palpitate, as if he would be reduced to dust by the power of the cataclysm at any moment. This was only the 3rd epical cataclysm. What if it was the 4th epical cataclysm? Fortunately, Lin Feng had enough small kiliocosm origin. Hence, heedless of the amount, he frantically infused small kiliocosm origin to maintain his vitality amidst the destruction. The epical cataclysm lasted for a long time. destruction, rebirth, destruction again, and rebirth again. With the small kiliocosm origin, it would be much easier to survive the epical cataclysm. Although having sufficient small kiliocosm origin could not guarantee a 100% chance of surviving the epical cataclysm, the success rate would undoubtedly be very high. As time passed, the epical cataclysm gradually ended and dissipated. Lin Feng's small kiliocosm expanded rapidly. Every time a kiliocosm sovereign survived the epical cataclysm, it was the best time for them to increase their strength. Even if Lin Feng did not do anything, his strength would increase by dozens or even hundreds of times. But this time, the river of spacetime in the small kiliocosm expanded exponentially. It seemed to have changed from a small river to a great surging river at once. Without a doubt, the expansion of Lin Feng's small kiliocosm was also very beneficial to the river of spacetime, the core power of the small kiliocosm. In fact, the increase in power in the river of spacetime was greater than Lin Feng had imagined. 3 Cataclysm Kiliocosm Sovereign. I didn't expect to become a 3 Cataclysm Kiliocosm Sovereign so quickly, Lin Feng muttered softly. He was ecstatic. He could no longer hold it in at a time like this. A smile appeared on his face. He still remembered that when he first came to the medium kiliocosm, although he had become a great and powerful kiliocosm sovereign, in reality, the other kiliocosm sovereigns did not pay much attention to Lin Feng. A mere kiliocosm sovereign Skyhorn dared to target Lin Feng at every turn. Lin Feng naturally had his pride. More than that, he had his conviction. How could he not have conviction after gradually going from an ordinary life form to a kiliocosm sovereign? Moreover, he possessed the principle of spacetime. Hence, this was the main reason why Lin Feng wanted to increase his strength quickly by accelerating time. Fortunately, he had succeeded again. Becoming a 3 Cataclysm Kiliocosm sovereign in such a short period of time was already a miracle. Lin Feng looked at the remaining small kiliocosm origin. There were still dozens of portions of small kiliocosm origin left. However, after experiencing the 3rd epical cataclysm, Lin Feng could already vaguely sense that the epical cataclysm seemed to have exceeded his control. From time to time, some accidents would cause the situation to deteriorate. If not for the fact that he had sufficient small kiliocosm origin, Lin Feng would probably struggle a lot during the 3rd epical cataclysm. This made Lin Feng understand that his small kiliocosm origin was really not enough. No matter how much there was, it would not be enough. In particular, the 4th epical cataclysm would definitely be very violent, unimaginably so. He had to make more preparations. His small kiliocosm origin was still a little lacking now. Although he could also attempt to survive the 4th epical cataclysm, Lin Feng did not want to take the risk. He had always hoped to control the danger of surviving the epical cataclysm. At the very least, he had to be very confident. This amount of small kiliocosm origin clearly could not satisfy Lin Feng. Forget it, I'll stop cultivating for the time being. Becoming a 3 Cataclysm Kiliocosm sovereign has increased my strength by a lot. Even the power of the river of spacetime has increased. Even if I encounter a 4 Cataclysm Kiliocosm sovereign, it's not impossible for me to fight him. Lin Feng was also making his considerations. Although he had never seen a true 4 Cataclysm sovereign, no matter how strong a 4 Cataclysm sovereign was, with his current strength and the principle of spacetime, it was not as if he did not have the power for a fight. Moreover, Lin Feng planned to return to the medium kiliocosm before thinking of a way to obtain more small kiliocosm origin. Only when he had enough small kiliocosm origin would he choose to survive the 4th epical cataclysm and become a true hegemon. But now he was ultimately still a little short. Swoosh! Lin Feng no longer hesitated. He stepped into the river of spacetime, and his figure instantly disappeared. In the Chaos Dojo, Lin Feng's figure appeared. Kiliocosm Sovereign Epic sensed him immediately. Your Majesty, You've survived the 3rd epical cataclysm? Kiliocosm Sovereign Epic's eyes widened. He still could not quite believe it. Up until now, many people did not even know how Lin Feng could survive the 2nd epical cataclysm in a short period of time. Now, he had even survived the 3rd epical cataclysm and become a their cataclysm Kiliocosm sovereign. That's right. I'm already a 3 Cataclysm Kiliocosm sovereign now. Lin Feng did not conceal it and replied directly. Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic gasped. A 3-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign. He was really a 3-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign. Moreover, wasn't it very dangerous for his true body to descend into a small Kiliacosm and trigger the epical cataclysm? It would also take a long time, but Lin Feng had become a 3-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign so quickly. That's right, His Majesty possesses the principle of spacetime. Could it be time acceleration? An idea flashed through Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic's mind. He seemed to have thought of something, and as soon as this thought appeared, it could no longer be suppressed. Moreover, he felt that he was probably getting closer and closer to the truth. However, the truth actually had nothing to do with Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic. On the contrary, the stronger Lin Feng was, the greater the status of a pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign like himself. The pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign was practically the representative of the true Kiliacosm Sovereign. The actual management of the entire dojo was done by Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic. Moreover, the stronger Lin Feng was, the more likely he might even become a medium Kiliacosm Sovereign. Without the threat of the epical cataclysms, he would be immortal. Then, Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic would also be immortal. The relationship between a pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign and a Kiliacosm Sovereign was basically about riding on the success of their superior. Now that Lin Feng's strength had increased further, Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic status was undoubtedly even more stable. Lin Feng did not know that so many thoughts had flashed through Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic's mind. He asked the Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic, "Has anything major happened in the medium Kiliacosm recently?" "Nothing major. Everything is very calm. Though, Your Majesty's reputation has already spread throughout the entire medium Kiliacosm." Lin Feng shook his head. This was not a good thing. However, he was in a hurry to obtain more small Kiliacosm origin now. As long as he obtained some more small Kiliacosm origin, Lin Feng could even become a 4-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign. Lin Feng currently had 2 methods. One was to expand the forces of the dojo and send people down to the small Kiliacosms on a large scale. With Lin Feng's current status, likely no one would deliberately target him anymore. However, descending to the small Kiliacosms on a large scale also required time, and the gains would not be much. He could only rely on accumulating enough small Kiliacosm origin bit by bit, and it would take a long time. The second method was to descend with the soul. Lin Feng had already tried descending with the soul, and the effect was rather good. However, Lin Feng also had reservations. Although he had gained a lot in that massive small Kiliacosm last time, in reality, his soul had also suffered some damage. This was while Lin Feng was lucky. If he was unlucky, Lin Feng would probably be severely injured. Severe damage to the soul was very troublesome. Even with Lin Feng's ability, he could not recover in a short period of time. Although obtaining the soul refinement technique had made Lin Feng's soul much stronger, Lin Feng did not want to use the method of descending with the soul again, unless absolutely necessary. However, apart from these 2 methods, was there a third way to obtain a large amount of small Kiliacosm origin? By the way, Your Majesty, some time ago, Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart came to the Chaos Dojo twice. However, you haven't returned at that time. Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart came here twice? Lin Feng pondered. Actually, Lin Feng had only become a Kiliacosm Sovereign for a short period of time. The only true friend he made was Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart. Moreover, although Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart only talked about benefits, sometimes he still resolved Lin Feng's major problems. Since Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart had come to the dojo twice, something must be up. All right, I'll personally go to the Skyheart dojo to visit Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart and see what he wants. Lin Feng stepped forward and warped towards the Skyheart dojo. In the Skyheart dojo, Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart expression was solemn. In reality, he was a little hesitant. Some time ago, when the divine abode appeared, Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart actually also wanted to participate. However, during that period of time, he went elsewhere and fell into a place and was trapped for a period of time. By the time he returned, the divine abode had already disappeared. However, he received news that the small Kiliacosm origin in the divine abode had actually been obtained by the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign, Lin Feng. That was despite there being many 2 Cataclysm and even 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. Lin Feng came in first, and was the first to obtain the small Kiliacosm origin in the divine abode. Based on Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart's understanding of Lin Feng, the first thing he did after obtaining so much small Kiliacosm origin was probably to induce the epical cataclysm in his internal small Kiliacosm in advance, and attempt to become a 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. Hence, Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart went to the Chaos Dojo. He searched for Lin Feng twice, but could not find him. I'll wait another 10 years. If there's no other movement in 10 years, I'll take a risk and make another trip. Once I succeed, perhaps I'll be safe for the 4th epical cataclysm. Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart was a 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. All these years, he had only wanted to survive the 4th epical cataclysm and become a hegemon as a 4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. However, how dreadful was the 4th epical cataclysm? Without being fully prepared, those who could survive it all had to get lucky. Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart did not want to rely on luck. He tried all kinds of methods to obtain more small Kiliacosm origin, in the attempt to be more certain of surviving the 4th epical cataclysm. However, even though he had been saving up all these years and had even become very stingy, refusing to do anything without benefits, the amount of small Kiliacosm origin he obtained was far from enough to satisfy Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart. Hence, the reason why Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart took the risk to make a trip to the Forbidden Zone this time was to obtain more small Kiliacosm origin. Going alone was not safe enough. He needed another helper. However, upon thinking about it, he realized that after being in the medium Kiliacosm for so many years, although he had quite a lot of friends, the only person whom he could really give up some benefits for, and could be considered true friends with, was the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. Swoosh! Just as Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart was having complicated feelings, a 3-star supremacy came to report outside. Your Majesty, the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign is visiting your Majesty. The Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign? Quick! Invite the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign in. Hearing this, Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart was excited. He hurriedly gave the order. The previous 2 times he went to the Chaos Dojo, he had missed Lin Feng. He did not expect the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign to take the initiative to visit him now. Perhaps the plan Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart was harboring could possibly be realized now. Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart. A familiar voice approached from afar and entered Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart's ears. A smile appeared on Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart's face. He looked at the familiar figure in the distance and said with a smile, Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for so long. Waiting for me? Lin Feng was slightly stunned. He had already arrived in front of Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart. Lin Feng came in front of Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart. Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart was all smiles. I haven't congratulated the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign for coming in first in the divine abode and obtaining all the small Kiliacosm origin in the divine abode yet. Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. Before Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart could finish speaking, his eyes suddenly focused when he saw Lin Feng. His pupils constricted slightly, and his expression seemed to be filled with disbelief. You, Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. You've become a 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. Lin Feng knew that he could not conceal it at all, and he did not intend to conceal it. He nodded and said, I obtained the small Kiliacosm origin in the divine abode. My luck was quite good. I survived the 3rd epical cataclysm and became a 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. You're really a 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. Kiliacosm sovereign Skyheart's expression was very complicated. On the one hand, he was very happy that Lin Feng had become a 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. After all, in his plan, the stronger Lin Feng was, the more chance there was for his plan to succeed. However, on the other hand, he had personally seen Lin Feng's ascension step by step. From a 1 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign to a 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign, never mind an epic, Lin Feng had not even taken 10,000 years. Such a fast improvement made even Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart rather green with envy. Of course, this was just a thought. At least in terms of realm, the current Linfeng was not much inferior to Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart. In fact, if the two of them really fought in a battle heedless of the cost, Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart would probably be the one in danger. The principle of spacetime was not an ordinary power. It was a power that countless Kiliakazam sovereigns dreamed of possessing. In fact, by relying on the principle of spacetime, Linfeng had already killed a 2-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. Now that Linfeng had become a 3-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign, could he not kill a 3-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign? Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart did not want to try it himself. Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign, you're truly the Kiliakazam sovereign with the fastest speed of cultivation and the best aptitude I've seen. Even the 3 medium Kiliakazam sovereigns back then were far inferior to the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Your potential is unimaginable. Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart praised sincerely. You flatter me, Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart. Why did you come to look for me the last 2 times? Linfeng was not too surprised. He knew that everyone who saw him become a 3-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign so quickly would be awed. Even when Linfeng sometimes thought about how he had become a 3-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign so quickly, and had walked the path that other Kiliakazam sovereigns had taken for a few epochs, he would feel emotional as well. As for Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart, he was only a 3-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign at the moment as well. However, he had progressed one step at a time and worked incredibly hard to get to where he was today. But now Linfeng had caught up to him. Only Kiliakazam sovereigns who had truly survived the epical cataclysm knew how difficult it was to survive the epical cataclysm. Regardless of feelings of envy or jealousy, there was no denying Linfeng's ability. There's indeed a matter I'd like to invite the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign to come along with me for. At the mention of business, Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart immediately perked up, and his expression turned solemn. Oh, what matter is it that's gotten you so serious? Linfeng was also a little interested. It must be unusual for a dignified 3-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign to be so solemn. Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Have you heard of the Null Magus Forbidden Zone? The Null Magus Forbidden Zone? Isn't it one of the top 10 forbidden zones in the medium Kiliakazam? That's right. It's the Null Magus Forbidden Zone. I'd like to invite the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign to investigate the Null Magus Forbidden Zone. We have a chance of obtaining a large amount of small Kiliakazam origin. Linfeng's eyes lit up. It was small Kiliakazam origin, and a large amount of it at that. It was impossible for him not to be tempted. Linfeng also urgently needed small Kiliakazam origin now. However, as one of the top 10 forbidden zones in the medium Kiliakazam, the Null Magus Forbidden Zone was not that easy to venture into. Since it was a forbidden zone of the medium Kiliakazam, that meant it was a forbidden zone for most Kiliakazam sovereigns. It was the same even for Kiliakazam sovereigns above 4 cataclysm. Some Kiliakazam sovereigns who entered the Null Magus Forbidden Zone had even fallen. Hence, this was an extremely dangerous place. Kiliakazam's sovereign Skyheart, please forgive my bluntness. The Null Magus Forbidden Zone is very dangerous. Even Kiliakazam sovereigns might fall. Moreover, even if we're willing to take the risk, many Kiliakazam sovereigns have already explored the Null Magus Forbidden Zones. How many good things can there be left behind? If there are no tangible benefits, it's not worth it for us to take the risk. Linfeng voiced his concerns. Haha, that's right. The Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign has considered everything very thoroughly. Do you know how the Null Magus Forbidden Zone was formed? I don't know. Please enlighten me. Kiliakazam sovereign Skyheart. The Null Magus Forbidden Zone was formed by a battle between Kiliakazam sovereign Null and Kiliakazam sovereign Magus. The 2 7-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns fought a major battle, which eventually formed a forbidden zone. It's said that the 2 7-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns were both in the midst of the eruption of cataclysmic power, but they were not confident that they could survive it. Moreover, a conflict broke out between them due to certain matters. How terrifying was it once 2 insane 7-cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns fought. Fortunately, it happened in the void and did not affect the medium kiliacosm. Otherwise, there's no knowing how much damage it would cause. Later, the two 7 kiliacosm sovereigns both perished together. Then, that region of the Great Battle became the Null Magus Forbidden Zone. However, back then, the two 7 kiliacosm sovereigns actually obtained a large amount of small kiliacosm origin. Perhaps to 7 kiliacosm sovereigns it was far from enough to survive the 8th epochal cataclysm, but to us the small kiliacosm origin is enough and even far exceeds the amount we need. Although many kiliacosm sovereigns had entered and obtained some small kiliacosm origin, there are still some core regions that have yet to be explored. Last time, I took the risk to enter that core area and accidentally found a place that contains a large amount of small kiliacosm origin. However, that place was very dangerous. I was even trapped for a long time, so I missed the appearance of the divine abode. Later, I was lucky enough to escape. I feel that I cannot obtain the small kiliacosm origin there alone, so I'd like to invite the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign to work with me. Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart explained all the details of the Null Magus Forbidden Zone thoroughly. Lin Feng also nodded to himself as he listened. How much small kiliacosm origin had been left behind by the two 7 kiliacosm sovereigns who fought madly and eventually perished together. Even obtaining 10% of it would be an impressive gain. At the very least, becoming a 4 kiliacosm sovereign would not be a problem. Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart took a risk to enter the core area of the Forbidden Zone. He was even trapped for a period of time, and missed the opportunity for the divine abode to appear in trying to obtain the small kiliacosm origin in the Forbidden Zone. Now, he had obtained important clues and invited Lin Feng. Lin Feng also urgently needed small kiliacosm origin now. The two of them hit it off almost immediately. "All right, when are we leaving?" Lin Feng agreed directly. "Huh? The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign has agreed just like that." Even Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart was a little stunned. They were going to challenge the most dangerous Forbidden Zone, and Lin Feng had agreed almost without any hesitation. Why wouldn't I agree? If Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart wants to become a 4 Kiliacosm Sovereign, do you think I don't want to become a 4 Kiliacosm Sovereign too? As for danger, to put it bluntly, with the principle of spacetime, what Forbidden Zone can endanger me? Lin Feng, on the other hand, appeared full of confidence. The reason he agreed so quickly was naturally because he had confidence. In terms of survival, there was probably no supreme treasure or secret technique that could compare to the principle of spacetime. The principle of spacetime? Seems like I was being worried for nothing. Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart smiled resignedly. Indeed, he only knew that the Forbidden Zone was dangerous, but it was dangerous to others. To Lin Feng, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign with the principle of spacetime, it was probably nothing much. What Lin Feng needed was specific clues. As long as there were clues, he was willing to take the risk. There's no time to lose. Let's set off immediately. Since Lin Feng had already agreed, Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart no longer hesitated and immediately made the decision.